Prince of Demons, the sibilant beast, and master of the spiraling depths, Demogorgon is the embodiment of chaos, madness, and all destruction. He seeks to corrupt all that is good and undermine all order in the multiverse, to see everything dragged, howling, into the infinite depths of the abyss. Demogorgon is not only the first demon lord within the D&D lore, he is one of the first, if not the first, demon lord to be named and put into text in a game. For all the way back in the original D&D, before Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Demogorgon and Orcus were introduced. It was said that Demogorgon was a demon lord that was supreme, and in any event, he is awesome in his power. He's a gigantic demon that is 18 feet tall and reptilian. His skin is plated with snake-like scales, his body and legs are those of a giant lizard. His twin necks resemble snakes, and his thick tail is forked. Demogorgon has 2 heads, which bear the visages of evil baboons, or perhaps mandrills. And rather than having arms, he has great tentacles. His appearance testifies to his command of cold-blooded things, such as serpents, reptiles, and octopi. Demogorgon is highly intelligent, and also possesses great powers in his 2 heads. Not much is said in the early editions of D&D on Demogorgon. Like most things at this stage of D&D, this was not a fleshed out character, but was established as one of the flagship demons of the Abyss. The theme that you'll notice early is that it is difficult to separate the name Demogorgon from the name Orcus, as the enmity between Demogorgon and Orcus is immense and unending. Demogorgon is a terrible opponent. Some say he is the strongest demon in all of the Abyss. In 2nd edition D&D, much is the same as 1st and original, but he is called a lesser god. But where does this demon lord come from? It is said sometimes that he is the first demon lord or the first demon, but to see the origins of Demogorgon, we have to go very far back in the history of the Abyss. For there was an era in the Abyss before the Tanar'ri. This was the time of the Oberiths. Not everyone knows the distinction between the two, but one of aforementioned Oberiths, a self-styled Queen of Chaos whose true name has been stricken from time, gathered their numbers and marched in a war on the multiverse. The Oberiths ruled the Abyss. They were content in their place, and after a fashion, the rest of existence was content to leave them to their secretive evils. Among these were the Oberith Lords, demons of vast powers that were the mouthpieces of the Abyss itself. Some of these demon lords were more powerful than the others, but the most powerful of them all was their prince, the first to rise from the primal matter of chaos and evil, Obox Ob. So when the Queen of Chaos marched upon the multiverse, her first act was to strike against the prince Obox Ob. It was the sheer audacity of the move that ensured her victory. Although powerful in her own right, she paled in comparison to the primal chaos that was the first prince of demons. None before the queen had attempted such an attack, and before Obox Ob was able to retaliate, he had been slain. But a small piece of him did manage to slink back into the depths of the abyss to hide. The remaining Oberith lords were shocked at the development, and many of them fell to the queen's side in deference rather than risk the wrath of one capable of slaughtering the mightiest of them all. As mortal life appeared and their souls came to the abyss, the Queen of Chaos was among the first to cultivate and nurture this new brand of evil. For as they grew, they transformed into a new breed of demon, the Tanar'ri. And the first Tanar'ri that the Queen of Chaos created was a twisted, deformed abortion of evil with boneless arms, twin simian heads, reptilian legs, and a twisted tail. A snapping, howling, and ultimately uncontrollable monster formed from the primal fears of mortal souls. The Queen of Chaos tossed this creature aside, and those that came after were less broken, as she perfected this art. She goes on to create all of the Tanar'ri we know today, and with the help of the flesh warpers, Sybriexes, she adjusted and transformed them to her liking. Before long, the Tanar'ri had grown to rival the Oberiths in variety and specialty. The most powerful of these was Miska, the spider, and when he matured to a demon to rival many of the Oberith lords of old, the Queen of Chaos crowned him the new Prince of Demons, and marched upon the outer multiverse. Yet although the Queen of Chaos had timed her assault on Obox Ob to perfection, she was unsuccessful in this attack. She had underestimated the balancing forces of law, and her armies were completely destroyed. Miska stripped of his crown and imprisoned, and the Queen forced to flee into hiding in a remote abyssal realm. The surviving Oberiths were thrown into disarray, and set upon by the Eladrin host, and from within by their own slaves, the Tanar'ri. who rose up to rebellion. In a fraction of the time it had taken for them to grow to power, the Obris were exiled to the corners of the Abyss, and lordship of the realm passed to the Tanar'ri. For many ages, these new Tanar'ri of the Abyss bickered over who could claim the title of the new Prince of Demons. Two particularly powerful Tanar'ri rapidly rose to prominence. You might recognize both of them, as these are the great Orcus and Grazd. In their struggles, neither saw the strange and deformed shadow approaching from the wet and forgotten depths of the Abyss. For in the shadow of planar wars and the rise of new races, that first malformed accident had grown. None were prepared for his arrival, and none could withstand his power when he claimed the title Prince of Demons for his own. Dozens of the most powerful Tanar'ri lords assaulted this new form, eager to put him down, but one after another they fell, their bodies rotting and life forces shattered. And in moments, the new Prince of Demons reduced the number of Tanar'ri lords by a dozen, and those who survived knew they stood in the shadow of the one true power. Even the mighty Orcus and Grazd were forced to kneel, for standing before them in all his terrible glory was the first, the primal Tanar'ri, and while the demon host rankled and roared at his arrival, none dared raise fist or claw against their new prince. Demogorgon had claimed his throne. This is one of the possible origins of Demogorgon, the first Tanar'ri, and after the fall of the Obris, he took over as Prince of Demons. Of course, this does not go unchallenged. He is eternally fighting with the likes of Orcus and Grazd, but since that moment, he is unrivaled in power. It is worth mentioning 4th edition's alternative origins of Demogorgon, as they have different origins of the Abyss itself. In this alternate telling of the history, Demogorgon was a primordial. These primordials followed whispers promising of power and dominion over the unfolding realms of creation. They entered the Abyss. The shattered realm they observed within the vortex was thoroughly corrupted, but these creatures were unconcerned with morality as they pressed on. The first to set forth was a petulant primordial of unbridled fury named Demogorgon. As Demogorgon waded into the turbulent surf, however, another being rose up from the darkened depths beneath the sea. The interloper Dagon challenged Demogorgon for the right to claim the Shard of Evil. I'm not going to get into full history of 4th edition, but essentially, Tharizdun the Mad God had a Shard of Evil that spawned the Abyss. There's more on that in the video on Tharizdun, linked below. The interloper Dagon challenged Demogorgon for the right to claim the Shard of Evil. The mighty primordials clashed in a battle that turned the sea to a bloody storm, but as they fought, a third being crawled up to claim the shard as his own. This was Obox Ob, a loathsome Oberith who became the first Prince of Demons. The primordials did not want to see the shard lay waste to the astral realms like some demons, including Obox Ob. The primordials, like Demogorgon, Orcus, and Baphomet, feared that Obox Ob's action would grant him control over all the cosmos. He fought Obox Ob, the Prince of Demons, for control of this. They flung Obox Ob and the shard down into the vortex beneath which the Abyss had formed. Where Obox Ob struck, the Abyss was sundered, forming a deep fissure. And as they followed the newly created Blood Rift into the lightless depths, Demogorgon, Orcus, and Baphomet were transformed into demon lords. There's a lot more to this story of 4th edition than what I've said here. The Queen of Chaos is still in here and plays a part in the story. 4th edition called them primordials, a new idea in 4th edition. Once godlike beings made of manifest entropy and elemental energy. They shaped much of the multiverse before the gods, and in this lore, the gods beat them. Regardless of his come up, how he was created, he was either the first primordial or the first Tanar'ri. And now he is the Prince of Demons, whether that is recognized by the rest of the demons or not. With the Abyss so full of chaos and disorder, it's a big question of what Demogorgon actually wants. After his origins, we get into some of what Demogorgon is actually like and what he is capable of. There are many unique things about him, including his two-headedness. And actually, his two heads are somewhat of separate entities, Amul and Hethrodaya. Amul prefers deception, and Hethrodaya favors destruction. Two sides of Demogorgon. Originally, Demogorgon had one head and one mind, but in a fight with the deity Amoth, he was nearly split in two. After he healed, his head remained split. The two heads often disagree with one another, but they turn disagreements to their mutual advantage. For example, one head struck an alliance with the powerful Lich Queen of the Deep Shadowfell, and the other head killed her to steal her powers. With these two different sides of him, it creates a cunning, cruel, envious, and ferocious being, even for a demon. He sees both sides of every problem and has plenty of attention to spare for his cosmos-spanning cult of sadism and destruction. Speaking of that cult, it is a small cult. It leaves a terrible swath of destruction across the land. They organize themselves into cruel war bands, relying on battle madness and wrath to overpower their enemies. They wander from town to town, burning, looting, and destroying everything in their paths, like miniature aspects of their lord's wrath. They destroy all they see. These worshippers include troglodytes, Kuatoa, humanoids that exult in mindless violence and destruction, and in times of chaos, humans and others flock to Demogorgon's cult. His priests teach that through savagery, strength, and slaughter, followers thrive and multiply where others fade and die. Where war racks the land, particularly when hordes of monsters sweep over bastions of civilization, leaving them in ruin, Demogorgon's cult grows strong. Twins born to cultists or kidnapped and indoctrinated at a young age lead Demogorgon's mightiest cults. Each twin serves one of Demogorgon's two personalities. Invariably, such a cult falls to infighting as one high priest turns against the other, hindering many a foul plot. Not a very solid business model. Temples to Demogorgon often reflect the dual nature of the Prince of Demons as well. Builders construct each temple symmetrically. One half is dedicated to Amul and the other to Hethrodaya. Priests, warriors, petitioners, and other functionaries dwell in whichever side of the temple better fits their personality, and a grand cathedral unites the two halves at the center. Though I mentioned in the 4th edition lore that the primordial that he originally fought was Dagon, I also have a video on him if you'd like to check it out. Another demon lord, Lord of the Depths. They actually have one of the most friendly relationships or alliances in all of the Abyss. It is said that if Demogorgon is the machine of destruction, Dagon is the cool, calculating mind behind it, sowing chaos in subtle, intricate ways. Dagon is an oracle and a sage among the demons. Creatures of the Abyss, including Demogorgon, seek his counsel. This rough alliance between Dagon's intellect and Demogorgon's brute strength makes their combined power formidable. Dagon whispers his ancient knowledge into each of Demogorgon's head, never both at the same time, thus playing a significant role in the tension between Demogorgon's two minds. So of course this relationship isn't purely friendly. Moving back to another demon lord, Orcus, it is said that the rivalry between demon lords is great, but the enmity between Demogorgon and Orcus is immense, unending, and like no other. They have many stories across D&D altogether. Most of the time, Demogorgon wins. I did find an edition of Dragon magazine where two of the writers fought with their actual stat blocks, and Orcus actually won the battle, but of course that is not canon. But that just goes to show how their powers have always been designed to be close to one another. In fact, and this is slight spoilers for Out of the Abyss in 5th edition, we get an epic introduction to Demogorgon, who is the central demon lord of the module, in which the players stumble in on a struggle between two demon lords, Orcus and Demogorgon, who proves why he is known as the Prince of Demons. The sounds of battle finally die away, the ground before you stained black and red with demonic blood and ichor. In the terrible grip of Demogorgon, even the mighty Orcus looks almost small. Tentacles hold the demon Prince of Undeath in a crushing grip, slithering across the maggot-riddled flesh of the horned demon as they tighten inexorably. A strangled gasp issues from the demon lord's throat as a horrific crunching sound echoes throughout the cavern, and his skull-topped wand clatters onto the floor. Demogorgon casts aside the limp form, which melts away as Orcus returns to the abyss that spawned him. The Prince of Demons throws back both of his two heads and roars his triumph. As he does, his nearer head turns, burning eyes raking across the battlefield, filled with bloodlust and battle rage. The Demon Lord searches for another target. This same module also has the players beating Demogorgon, potentially, and also states in a side block that if you prefer, you can just as easily swap Demogorgon or Orcus out. It doesn't really matter. As far as any module is canon, I'm taking this for what it is. And I think in most settings, Demogorgon will always defeat Orcus. So besides killing his rivals and plotting, scheming, and arguing with himself, what does Demogorgon want? And as the oldest of all Tanar'ri, or primordials, Demogorgon has had eons to plot and scheme and think about these internal goals. He's had some success, such as the conquest of the Blood Shallows, the destruction of the realm of Nagarl, and the creation of the Retrievers, and others that he has failed, such as the transformation of the Isle of Dread into a new abyssal realm under his control, and the subjugation of the material plane's Kraken population. The Kraken being too Machiavellian on their own, they made poor minions, and is a direct line from a Dragon magazine. The Prince of Demons retains an impressive list of goals that easily exceeds any other demon lord. The reason for this is simple. Demogorgon is, in many ways, those two creatures. They share one body, but each of those creatures has enough goals for one. Perhaps the most famous of Demogorgon's goals is, like I mentioned before, the destruction of Orcus and Grast. The three demons have been locked in battle since their conception. Demogorgon has technically never fully defeated either army or demon lord, for when he moves against one, the other's forces are always there to strike at him, and Orcus and Grast will never set their hatred aside either. Of course, he has other demon lords he wishes to destroy, Fraz-Urblu and Zuragurex. Another goal that Demogorgon has, even as a creature as feral and murderous as he, is lust. His consorts through the ages have been as varied as all the Abyss has to offer, but recently his tastes have seemed to run to the human form. For many decades, his lover was the succubus Shami Umore, but when Demogorgon discovered she had been manipulating his personalities for her own gain, he had her imprisoned in the wells of darkness for eternity. It's kind of a toxic relationship. Then he took up the queen of the succubi and had horrific offspring with her. Many beasts, including one named Arendagrost, a monster that even Demogorgon finds unsettling to look at. This opens up a small revelation that we don't realize as a viewer into the story. These two succubus that he takes on were able to manipulate him with his two heads. Many do not realize the extent to which his two heads detest and loathe one another. Demogorgon's greatest enemies might be Orcus and Grast, but Amul and Hethrodaya, his two heads, greatest enemies are each other. Both believe he would be much more powerful without the other's meddling. Yet neither believes he can live without the other. Over the eons, both heads have tried countless plans to end the schism that rules them, yet to date, none of these plans have succeeded. But Demogorgon is also a creative and innovative creature, again reflecting his two sides. He has invented a lot of foul things, and he has countless unique creatures at his beck and call. It is said that he created chimeras, ettins, castas, marrows, retrievers, and he turned the first ever Death Knight, St. Kargoth, into an undead Death Knight. Demogorgon, of course, resides on his own layer of the Abyss, the 88th layer to be specific of the Abyss, plane of briny water broken by rocky prominences. Demogorgon has a palace. It is a great serpentine double tower, each crowned by skull-like minarets. Below this mighty fortress extends measureless chill and darkened caverns. Fiendish abyss, krakens, and ixochitl roam the foul seas of the abyssum, warring incessantly with each other. Some people call this 88th layer the Brine Flats, and others the Gaping Maw. A swirling whirlpool drains water from the river Styx and flows into this abyssal layer, making it a place of both deep and dark seas as well as fetid swamps. His palace is called Abyssum, which rises out of the inky depths. He also maintains a fortress called Ungorthredic, and the layer's grotesque bogs. From either of these places of dark power, Demogorgon, lord of all that swims in darkness, holds the title Prince of Demons through sheer might alone. Finally, I will talk a little bit about how Demogorgon maintains his strength as the Prince of Demons. He is statted in many editions of D&D. And although his appearance changes in slight ways, there are a couple things that always maintain themselves. First, his HP, initiative, and just base stats are very high. He's as strong as he is intelligent, as he is wise, etc. With two heads on his shoulders, he's got the whole package. Some editions he can take 2 rounds of whole actions with his 2 sides. He attacks with his tentacles, of which he has 4, and his forked tail. But probably his most intimidating and deadly attack is his gaze. Each of Demogorgon's heads has its own gaze attack. This is not a gaze that will just stun a creature, it is a gaze of insanity. With 2 heads, he can use both gazes in the same round. He can split these 2 heads, or more terrifyingly, he can lock the gazes of both heads on a single target and use his special hypnosis gaze. His gazes will charm, cause his victims to go insane, or hypnotize them. Other than that, he's really just extremely strong, and his battle tactics are next to none, as he is just a creature of complete destruction and cunning. And while there have been so many changes over all of the editions of D&D, it is pretty impressive that Demogorgon has remained the Prince of Demons for as long as he had. At this point, he has still never been bested by his foes. It is a very chaotic and tenuous status quo. And for being a being of complete chaos, he is very good at planning. Even though he has many powerful enemies like Orcus and Grazd, permanently, which they have both gotten very close to, Demogorgon almost has free reign, and with Dagon's ancient knowledge and support at his backing, Demogorgon poses the greatest threat to the rest of all the realms. And his final goals aren't really nuanced, and they aren't subtle. The sibilant beast, the master of the spiraling depths, if he has his way, will one day see the entire world sunk into chaos and madness as he witnesses the entirety of the multiverse dragged howling into the infinite depths of the abyss.